Chapter 8 A Shadow in the Woods. Saint-Domingue, 1775 to 1776. 13-year-old Thomas Alexandre had barricaded himself in his room. His brother had been torn from his side, his mother and sisters were gone, and all he knew was that it was all his father's fault. He didn't care if they were blood. Rage consumed him, and he wanted nothing more than to find his father's pistol and shoot him. A sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "I'm not talking to you. I'll never speak to you again," he shouted through the door. "Thomas, it's me," came a hoarse reply. "Please open the door. I need to speak with you." Recognizing Nuit's voice, Thomas opened the door, his anger still boiling. "Did you see what he did? I'm going to kill him," he spat. "You will do no such thing," Nuit replied firmly. "Don't ever let anyone hear you say those words again. The last thing your mother needs is for you to get yourself lynched." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "She left you a letter. I don't know what it says, but if there's one thing I know, it's that your mother is always 10 steps ahead. She will find a way through this, and so will you. But you cannot take on a white man alone, even if he is your father. I can't just sit here, Nuit. I watched my mother and sisters tied up like animals from my window," he shouted, his voice breaking. "And where's Audie?" "I don't know," she answered cautiously. "I think your father sold him too, but to someone else, not the Maubiers." "Then let me after them. I'll kill every slaver in Jérémie." "You need to calm down right now, Thomas Alexandre. I'm deadly serious. It doesn't matter if you want to behave like the whites. You do not look like them. So shut up and listen to me." Thomas was stunned by her bluntness. Nuit's tone softened as she handed him the letter, but her words remained stern. "Bide your time, Thomas. Play along, and then you must save us all." "He needs to pay for this," Thomas fumed. "Yes," Nuit agreed, "and one day he will, but not today. I don't know how I can bear to be around him after this." "Find a way, Thomas. You have to. Otherwise he might sell you too. He's going to France, where he will have money and power. If you are with him, you will have access to that same wealth and influence. That's how you free your family." "I'll free you too, Nuit, I promise. I will save everyone. I will save every slave in Saint-Domingue," Thomas declared resolutely. "I hope so, dear child." Her voice took on a grandmotherly tone. "You've always been privileged, so I understand that feeling utterly helpless is new to you. But I know the pain you're feeling now. I felt it when my daughter and husband were stolen from me. At least you know where your family has been sent. I haven't seen mine in nearly 30 years. Her voice ached with sorrow. Thomas was dumbstruck. "I didn't know, Nuit. I'm so sorry. I don't usually talk about it," she replied gently. "How do you do it? How do you look at my father every day, knowing what he did?" Thomas asked, his voice trembling. "It wasn't your father who did that to me. It was the master who claimed to own me before him. And one day, God willing, the man who stole my family will die a painful death for the harm he caused. But how do I endure it every day?" She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I pray. It's not anything fancy, but it works for me. I ask God for patience and for the opportunity to reclaim what is mine. But God works in His own time, and my moment of vengeance hasn't come yet. Though I believe it will. I believe God loves us, and if we remain faithful and pray enough, He will deliver justice. It's what gets me through each day. I just hope I live to see it." "They'll burn in hell for what they did to you," Thomas said with conviction. "Yes, they will, my child. No one who commits sins that evil could possibly have a place in heaven. So when I face my father, I'll imagine his flesh burning slowly as he prepares to meet the devil," Thomas said angrily. I know you'll find a solution long before that happens. You will save your family." He grabbed the old woman and held her close. "Thank you, Nui. You are your mother's son, Thomas Alexandre Dumas. You are the grandson of an Amazon, and you will change the world. This moment is where your rise begins." She smiled, ruffling his hair affectionately. For the next several days, Antoine barricaded himself in his study, avoiding his son as much as Thomas avoided him. The house felt eerily empty without the rest of the family. It took nearly a week before they found themselves in the same room again, when Antoine finally stopped taking dinner privately in his study. The tension was thick as they stared at each other across the long table. "My son," Antoine began, his voice faltering slightly, "we need to discuss the logistics of our journey to France. I know you are probably upset about your mother and siblings. I am too. But you must understand that everything I did for you. To protect you and secure what is rightfully yours, as any good father would." Thomas drew in a sharp breath, but knew he had to keep his true opinions to himself. "I understand, father," he said simply, unable to look Antoine in the eyes as he responded. "When you see the wealth that awaits us, it will all become clear," Antoine continued, though his words did little to ease the strain between them. "Anyways, I've been going over the ledgers. Passage to France for two is costly, and although I've come into some money recently through certain sales, it's not enough for our passage." Antoine was trying to sidestep the truth, but Thomas knew better. "By my calculations, we need at least another full harvest sold to cover the costs," Antoine pressed on. "But we can't afford to wait that long, so we must take more drastic measures." Thomas felt a sinking feeling in his chest. This was not what he wanted to hear. Sensing his son's unease, Antoine hesitated, then switched his approach as if trying to sell an idea he knew Thomas was certain to hate. His father was not a particularly skilled salesman. That was probably why the coffee still sat in the storage shed. "Thomas Alexandre, you understand that when we reach France, I will officially be a marquis. Do you grasp what that means?" Antoine asked. "I do, father," Thomas replied curtly. "Then you understand why I must do everything in my power to get us to France as swiftly as possible," Antoine continued. "Yes, father," Thomas responded unemotionally. "So, in order to make your future a reality, a future of wealth and promise—" He could see Thomas was not convinced. "I'll enroll you in the best schools. You'll wear the finest clothing. We will go to parties with the most important people in the empire." Thomas couldn't help but admit that it all sounded very exciting. His demeanor softened ever so slightly. Sensing this, Antoine seized the moment to deliver the next, more startling news. "But none of this can happen until we get there, and to get there soon, I need to sell you." Thomas' jaw dropped. His stomach sank like an anchor to the ocean floor. "Just temporarily, don't worry," Antoine hastened to reassure him. "It's a bond, just through the next harvest." "You're enslaving me as well, father?" Thomas asked, disbelief and betrayal lacing his words. "It's not as bad as you make it sound," Antoine insisted. "It's like when I went to war. Did I have my freedom? No. They punished me if I stepped out of line, and I risked my life. In truth, it's a rite of passage, a way to instill discipline necessary in young men of your age. I'd even say I suffered more in the army than you ever will in a cane field. I put my life on the line." "Oh, then I suppose I should thank you," Thomas replied sarcastically. "Exactly," Antoine responded, oblivious to the storm brewing within his son. "Then, once you've earned the money I need, we'll leave for France together." "And how do I know you won't just take the money and leave me here?" Thomas blurted out, his restraint finally giving way. "Thomas Alexandre," Antoine said slowly, "I understand that you are upset about what happened with—" He still couldn't say it. "I understand," But everything I did for you, for our future." Thomas stared at him blankly. "Oh, and I don't want you using my name while this is all sorted. You'll be known as Thomas Rétoré, just until we land in France." "You're changing my name," Thomas balked. "Not legally. You won't want this part of your past haunting you in France either. Trust me on this," Antoine replied coolly. Thomas knew he should probably feel insulted, but there were far bigger worries on his mind. Plus, he wasn't exactly keen on embracing his paternal moniker at the moment. "How can I trust you after everything you did?" Thomas demanded. "Because on the day you were born, I made a promise to your mother to protect you, and I meant it," Antoine replied. His voice carried an unexpected sincerity. Thomas looked at him earnestly. "I wasn't sure if you still had a soul, father," he said quietly. "In truth, son, I don't know if I do. I don't know if anyone on this island does. You see, I discovered something about this world some time ago. I looked around and I saw suffering everywhere, and I concluded that if God were suddenly condemned to live the life which he has inflicted upon men, he would kill himself. This brought me to the single most important conclusion of my life. God isn't real, and by proxy, neither is the devil. We are all living in spite of this world, not because of it. We must live for ourselves alone. I owe nothing to anyone but myself." Thomas was hit hard by his father's words. There was some truth in the monologue, but he refused to let his faith be shaken so easily. Thomas knew that Satan dealt in temptation and doubt. "Then, father, if you're only out for yourself, why spare me, if you can even call it that?" "Because, my son, every marquis needs an heir," Antoine replied simply. And with that, the conversation was over. The next morning, Thomas was enslaved. The new reality absolutely terrified him. It was a shock how brutal it was. He had never before experienced such demeaning and painful treatment. By the end of his first week, his back had already borne multiple whiplashes. The overseers said he was defiant and his work was too slow. Thomas had once thought himself to be very skilled, but literacy didn't translate to the cane fields. Though he had always known slavery was horrific, the reality of it was far more harrowing than he had imagined. One is capable of a lot more clarity when one's own body bears the stripes of the world's suffering. He realized now how much his mother had tempered the cruelty on their own plantation. Without her vigilant eye, he saw firsthand the inhumane conditions the rest of the island endured. As his body reeled from the stinging gashes on his back, the only mercies were the shoes on his feet. They were a rare privilege among the enslaved, though they did little to protect him from the fire ants that bit at his flesh. The ants loved to congregate at the roots of the sugarcane and were not fond of those tasked with cutting it down. He was also surprised to learn that sugarcane leaves were sharp. They would cut him like a million little paper cuts, and he wouldn't even realize until the sweat trickled down and caused them to burn. The worst, however, were the consequences for those with the audacity to dream of a better life for themselves. There was a lynch mob that chased after a man from his plantation who had tried to run away. He didn't make it. When he was brought back, his body was mutilated and hanged, while the whites poured themselves lemonade from picnic baskets. It made Thomas sick. He realized quickly that there was only one thing to do: keep his head down and pray his father gets him out of this soon. It was hard not to rebel against the treatment he received, but each time he felt the urge to fight, he recalled his mother's letter. He had memorized every line. He knew that without money, there was no hope of freeing himself or his family. But even with this knowledge, the relentless brutality of the fields had worn on him. Despair might have consumed him entirely had it not been for Nui, who visited him each month with a formal letter from his father and a secret one from his mother. Nui had established a clandestine network, a slave mail system that allowed letters to pass between plantations and reach Marie Cesette. Thomas cherished both letters, though his replies to his father were brief and restrained. In contrast, his letters to his mother overflowed with the emotions he struggled each day to suppress. He was glad to hear that his mother and sisters were as safe as they could be under present circumstances, and he continued to write back with promises to free them as soon as he could afford to do so. It felt ironic to say from his diminished condition, but he meant every word. After nearly a year of enslavement, Nui arrived one Sunday with a note from Antoine calling him home. This must be it, Thomas thought. His pain and efforts had finally earned their passage to France. He gathered his tattered shoes and torn linen shirt and began the journey back home with Nui. As they walked back in silence, he found himself getting excited at the prospect of the wealth that awaited him. He had tried to suppress his hope and anticipation as much as possible while stuck in slavery, for it made the days go by even more excruciatingly slowly. But now, with the end in sight, hope found its way back into his steps. "Are you skipping, young master?" Nui asked with a smile. "Oh," Thomas said, glancing down in a moment of embarrassed realization. "I suppose I was." "No, don't stop, honey," she said kindly. "You've earned a bit of happiness after all that." "Do you know when we leave?" Thomas asked eagerly. "I'm not coming with you, Thomas. Your father only has 2 tickets. You'll have to manage without me," Nui replied. "I don't know if I can handle him without you to mediate," Thomas said with honest trepidation. "You can. You must. Your mother and sisters are depending on you," she said firmly. "And Audie," Thomas added. "Yes, and Adolphe. I believe you are leaving in a few days. The ship, Le Trésorier, is already in the harbor at Quays, about a day's ride from here. But there's something else you should know," she said, her tone shifting. "Your father won his case against your aunt. He is selling the land in Jérémie, and the Maubiers have been hired to manage Charles's old plantation up north. Your mother will be going up to La Guinaudet with them, as am I." "Isn't that where she was enslaved as a child?" Thomas asked, his voice quiet. "Next door," Nui replied softly. "But there are ghosts there that are best left unspoken. Either way, I thought you should know. You'll have to write to her in Cap Français now." "Will you take care of her until I can free you all?" he asked earnestly. "I always have, honey," she said with a gentle smile. Nui had been right. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and preparations for their departure. Antoine spent most of his time with the family lawyer poring over contracts. Maubier visited several times to discuss the transition, but whenever Thomas tried to inquire about his family, he was swiftly dismissed before Maubier could respond. He was also deeply frustrated to learn that he still wasn't free yet. Thomas had been bonded again to the ship's captain to cover the cost of his voyage. But at least it was off the plantation, and he'd be free as soon as they landed in Le Havre. When the morning of their departure finally arrived, Thomas found himself tasked with loading their bags onto the carriage. Nui and the other people enslaved to his father had already been sent to La Guinaudet. As Thomas tied down his trunk, a small rock struck him squarely on the back. Frustrated, he turned to see who had thrown it, but no one was there. He resumed his work, only for another rock to sting his leg moments later. Determined to find the culprit, he looked toward the tree line and spotted a dark figure lurking in the shadows. In the dim light of dawn, it was difficult to make out who it was. He was about to move toward the woods and call out to the figure when his father emerged from the house. "Are you ready, son? Big day," Antoine said cheerfully. Refocusing, Thomas replied, "Yes, father," and he climbed into the carriage. As the stagecoach began to roll away, leaving the plantation behind, the shadow emerged from the edge of the forest. He kept silent, his eyes fixed on her as her face grew smaller with each turn of the wheels. No words were exchanged, no embrace shared. This was the last time Thomas Alexandre would ever see his mother. She faded back into the trees in silence, the rising sun refusing to betray their secret farewell. A single tear slid down Thomas' cheek. It was 1776, and Thomas Alexandre Dumas was on his way to France.